Hi everyone, my name is Lisa LaRue and I'm delighted to welcome you to our launch webinar today. Thank you so much for taking the time from your busy schedules to be with us. Before I say anything else, I want to encourage you to please introduce yourself in the chat box, your name, where you're at the moment. It's just a way for all of us to connect a bit. I am delighted to tell you that thus far, 466 people have registered to join the SVRI Faith and GBV community of practice and its various working groups. We have been blown out of the water. We had plans at the start around, how will we get the membership? And we've just been overwhelmed with the interest and delighted. And thank you so much. But before we talk more about the CoP, allow me to just do a few housekeeping things first. So this webinar will be 60 minutes if we manage to stick to time, and it will be recorded. All participants are muted, but like I said, please do introduce yourself in the chat, your name, your organization, where you're based. Then live interpretation is available in French and Spanish. So please make use of this if French or Spanish is your preferred language. Now, to give you an overview of an hour, you'll see the agenda on your screen. So first, Liz Dartnell, Executive Director of the SVRI, will share with us why this community of practice is being launched at SVRI right now. She will be followed by our distinguished speaker, Vina O'Sullivan. I'm sure many of you know her already, but I'll introduce her a bit more officially when it gets to that point. And Vina will share with us some more on why religion is relevant to addressing GBV. Then Laurie Heiser will respond as discussant. And after Vina and Laurie, I'm going to share a bit more on the CoP plans for the coming year and introduce our three working group chairs, Raphael, Selena, and Nora. And they will each take 5 minutes to share the plans for the different working groups in the coming year. And this will be followed by an open Q&A slot where you can ask any questions that you may have that hasn't been answered up to that point. Again, thank you everyone for being here today. I'm now going to hand over to Liz Dartnell, Executive Director of SVRI, and the drive behind forming this Faith and GBV CoP. Liz.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm not sure I'm the drive, but I'm so excited. I am thrilled to be part of this launch of the new GBV and Faith community of practice. And it's so great to see so many people here, and just the interest that Lisa spoke about. It's really a testament to the interest in the role of faith in ending violence against women and violence against children. And we're just thrilled. So just a little bit about the SVRI. We really are focused on action, strengthening and expanding research that makes a real difference in preventing and responding to violence against women and violence against children in worldwide, globally. Currently, most resources for this research are concentrated in high-income countries, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you all who are on about this, leaving much less support for lower middle-income country regions. And that's where we at the SVRI step in. We are the largest global network dedicated to advancing research in these areas, leveling the playing field for local researchers, and our goal is a world free of violence against women, children, and anyone affected by gender inequality. We make this happen by creating a supportive ecosystem where partners and networks collaborate, grounded in a sense of possibility and empowerment. And this is where this new community of practice on faith and GBV fits in. Faith communities are a crucial player in this ecosystem with their deep grassroots connections. You have the power to create real change through religion and gender. Although religion and gender have always been connected, we in the development sector have only recently begun to engage faith very meaningfully in GBV work. Faith can be a double-edged sword. It can promote gender equality, but it also, like many things, perpetuate violence. And that's why it's so essential for faith actors to deepen our understanding and engagement in GBV prevention and response, and for GBV prevention and response actors to better understand the faith sector. But why the SVRI to be hosting a community of practice on GBV and faith? Tier Fund, Vina on this call will tell you a little bit about that history maybe, but Tier Fund, you trusted us enough to hand over the custodianship of the Joint Learning Initiative for Faith in Local Communities many years back. That was on faith and GBV. So thank you, Tier Fund, and thank you, Vina, for your faith in us. Where we worked with key leaders in this field on collaboration between researchers, practitioners, faith leaders, and survivors. And now, with this new community of practice, we will continue to share knowledge, best practices, and fresh ideas, bringing faith perspectives into the global conversation on GBV and bringing GBV perspectives into the global conversations on faith. And there are a number of reasons why this project right now. First, our members, the SVRI members, we have a membership over 11,000 members, have asked for a space where faith leaders and researchers can collaborate on GBV prevention response. Second, we are seeing a global pushback on women's rights, making this work more urgent than ever. And third, Africa is also experiencing a conservative religious pushback. And so it is critical that we engage with each other on GBV prevention and response, and we need to do so today. So through this collaboration together, our vision for the future is twofold. First, an international development community that understands the role of faith actors and faith communities in GBV prevention response, and that community are willing and able to engage with faith and faith actors to address GBV. And second, are faith leaders from different faiths that understand the drivers of GBV, what works, what doesn't, to prevent and respond to GBV, and are committed to preventing and responding to GBV in collaboration with other multi-sectoral stakeholders. So on that optimistic, aspirational, but I really believe achievable note, I'm going to hand back to Lisa to introduce our guest speaker, a dear, dear friend and colleague, Vina O'Sullivan. So back to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Liz. And that was inspirational. I'm going to hand over to Vina now. It's my privilege, Vina, to introduce you. And like Liz said, it's been a long journey to get to this point. Now, for those of you who do not know Vina O'Sullivan, she's worked for Tier Fund for almost 25 years now, amongst other positions, leading Tier Fund's HIV work globally, the global responses in peace building and ending sexual and gender-based violence, the organization's team of thematic support experts, and the regional programs in Asia. And then in 2021, she was appointed as international director for Tier Fund, overseeing Tier Fund's work internationally. I think it's so appropriate that Vina is speaking today, because like Liz said, for years and years ago, she was instrumental in working with SVRI around creating a better understanding of religion within GBV prevention and response. So Vina, we're delighted that you can be here today, and the floor is yours.
Liz, Lisa, it's an absolute honor. It's really moving to be here at this time, but also kind of the things that you said, Lisa, I realize like how old I am and how long I've done this now. Oh, it's terrible time to move on. But genuinely, Liz, you and SVRI were the safest people to hold this, and we got to trust that the time is right for now. And I'm super thrilled to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm really conscious just watching people come in that there's heaps of lived experience in the space. And I just, I deep honor and respect to all of you. So I really want to acknowledge that first. I said yes to speaking only because it's an absolute joy to share everything that I've learned. I also, it's part of my own journey of 15 years to share about how Africa changed me, this Indian girl going to Africa to work and as a young one those days. And I really want to talk about that a little bit because that'll explain why I feel so compelled about doing this, about this subject, and also just my hope, I think. So just to kind of organize myself that way. So it was the HIV struggle for me. So I went straight from India to working in sub-Saharan Africa, and oh my goodness, I literally had to sacrifice and relearn everything that I'd learned. And an extraordinary continent with an extraordinary epidemic at that time, so painful. And here I was sent off by Tear Fund to go and work with faith leaders and faith communities. I locked myself up for about 3 days because I couldn't bear to do that. And anyway, off I went because it was a job, right? And I started off in Ethiopia, and everything hurt. Everything hurt, from my head, my heart, the awareness I had, to the pain that I felt, because I'd come from working with people living with HIV movement in India, and that was dynamic and exciting. And here I was. And that was really tough. And then I met this incredible community of faith leaders living with HIV. And some of you may know them. It's a blast from the past, Anarella, and then they were in Arella, and this community that had extraordinary patience, extraordinary grace to talk to faith leaders about their own lived experience so courageously. Now, I'm going back to a time when there was no treatment even. I had to really get over myself big time. Because as painful as that engagement was, we started seeing change when churches, church leaders were talking about people with HIV and their rights, fighting for treatment alongside. And South Africa, you taught us so much, and that began changing things so dramatically. Who was I? I had to get over myself. Now, in 2011, armed with courage and that bit of knowledge, I moved to South Africa to live where no one knew me, I thought. And I said, if I can do this to end sexual violence, that would be amazing, and bring faith communities on board. And I chose Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, where I had some of the worst stories that I have ever heard in my life. And I just started by talking to women, and I see Solange is there on the call, Solange and myself. And oh my goodness, we just couldn't stop the women coming in. But there was something really different about these women. They were not coming in as if they were in hiding. They were coming in absolutely clear that they wanted to challenge their faith leaders. And they wanted to challenge their faith leaders to not stay quiet, to stop their own abuse in their homes. They were so open about that. And that birthed an incredible movement that I think is still going today, called Pepisa. This incredible group of women who are all survivors of sexual violence in South Africa. And I think that in 7 districts out of the 10 in South Africa. Really proud of you, girls. And this, again, was an amazing movement, amazing learning experience for me. And I was like, just riding the wave. And then 15 countries across sub-Saharan Africa, 15 countries later, we had some of the strongest movements of women that I've ever seen. In 2015, I went to Central African Republic, and for those of you who may remember, that was the start of a brutal conflict in Central African Republic. I was in Bangui, don't ask me why, but I was in Bangui, and I remember walking, P5 was the area which was at the heart of Bangui, and people had flooded from everywhere. Now, on one side of the street, there was a church, and on another side of the street, there was a mosque. And we just made it into the compounds of these 2 places. It was teeming with women. And so we, again, as part of, doing good research, Lisa, you've walked with me many times on this, in this path, in this space, we started talking to women, thinking, okay, if we get a sample size of 50 who will talk to us, 151 women later, we had to apologize that we couldn't hear anymore, because every single one of them had been raped. Every single one of them wanted to see things change. And it is mind-boggling. How come you've come to the church and the mosque? How come? Have they received you? Have they been a place of refuge for you? And they said, no, But we want that to change. We came because we hoped. And this is the beginning of really trying to grasp with what hope, that intangible but very tangible for them, hope. And that was a game changer for me. The hope that is, they didn't come expecting stuff. They came because they just hoped. And that hope is charged. And that hope is that resilience. That hope is deep power. I've had to learn. And that hope is very, very precious. Now, for you, as speaking as an Indian, acutely conscious, the continent of Africa. Now, look, the Afrobarometer, which does regular surveys, and I think the last survey they did was about 34 country national surveys, and said overwhelmingly Africa is religious, right? We know that over 95% of the people are affiliated strongly to religion, and religious leaders are most trusted, more than politicians. We all know why and understand that. But that does, confuse minds like mine, because you see so little and yet the trust is so deep. I can only give in to what you as people of the continent believe and seek to serve you from that way. I think to understand religion, I've had to go beyond just belief, I think, when I think about faith in the African continent. And I think for me, seeing religion in Africa, it's not something innate or mysterious even, but actually it is socially situated. Every aspect of society, every aspect of life, it is so powerful, sometimes not very obvious. It is also such a mediating factor because religious practices influence social norms and the other way around as well. So they're so, coming from India, you see religion as very separate, even though we say we're very spiritual in my country, but this intrinsic, where you cannot separate it, that's what I learned in Africa. So I stopped trying to separate it, that whole dichotomy and, Western way of thinking. I had to stop a long time ago. The influence and the expansive permeation of faith is a force to engage with. When that is good, it is very, very good. And Liz, like you said, it can be a double-edged sword. And we've seen all sides of that. But we cannot ignore it. So I might compel this community that is even here. We are all here because we want to see this end. We cannot bear it. I'm sure you, like me, cannot bear it when we hear story after story and the media news and in every country. I'm ashamed of my own country in this. But the vision that we have, the commitment that we hold, it goes beyond projects and programs. I'm speaking as Stefan, an international engineer, but this is not about a project or a program. I'm talking about a large-scale social movement that brings seismic shifts in thought, belief, and action. I remember going to Burundi, again, that must have been about 2012 or something, very rural part of Burundi, where one of my teammates, some of you may know, Prabhudeep, and all he had done was spend 5 days talking with church leaders in a very remote part about what does the Bible say, what about, the role of men, women, and all of that. We went back 6 months later. That rural community had created referral pathways. That rural community had 2 very simple phones that they would use, that if they heard about any woman being mistreated, they would all rush in, they would rescue her, they would do the needful according to the law, they would look after her. There was no violence in that village. That spread community after community. How much did it cost us at Tier Fund? 1 trip that we paid for Prabhu. Last year, we were hosting something in Kigali with 49 religious leaders from across the continent. And they added up their community membership, 8 million. If 8 million of those we're transformed. The power of this movement is immense. It is compelling. So my hope for us is that we will all understand deeply and work confidently to engage with foundational beliefs of our faiths, of the norms, of the attitudes that contribute to the continuation of this epidemic, pandemic. We need a mindset change. Of course, we need a mindset change. Like I continuously need it. I need to see these communities not as resource poor, but as resource rich, because that hope that I saw, that I understood, is a rich resource. So how do we learn from the women who carry on? Generation after generation, rape after rape, they carry on, still hoping. We have to know our people who want to lead the movement and share that power of information. It's so powerful. You know, I discovered over 80% of religious leaders have not been through education, formal education. I, who have been educated, had to learn so much. Imagine that. So sharing that information in the theological spaces where they get trained is really precious and really good, worth it, I'll tell you. And we have to be okay for things to not be perfect, these movements to not be perfect, where they don't tick every quality standard. And the Pepisa movement in South Africa carries on, even though they're not perfect, but still powerful. They are part of the KZN task force. How impressive is that? And we need patience, says the most impatient one, patience to last the pace. If they can, we can, I say to myself. And it's not just about the absence of violence, but a thriving of relationships. Sometimes because we talk about ending violence against women, we get focused on ending violence, but not the opposite, which is what humanity needs. It's the thriving of relationships, the need for role models. Peace, we know, is not the absence of war. And we have to keep our vision on hope, I feel, that powerful ingredient, that intangible but so tangible for our women, who I speak about across the countries, across communities. And I really, really hope that in spite of all the pain that we carry day in and day out, and I just want to say, I can't stop thinking if Rebecca Chiptegei, she left church that day, but if it was a different kind of church where they had a different kind of a conversation, I really wonder. Let's get to every faith community. Please, let's do this. I'm so delighted that you're doing this. All power to you, with you, keen to walk this journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veena. Just for your openness and honesty and in sharing your journey and what you've experienced and learned. Thank you so much. I'm immediately handing over to our discussant, Laurie Heiser. To be honest, I feel like everyone within the eVorg space knows Laurie. She's a global expert on the prevention of violence against women and children, bridging research and practice with expertise in gender and health, social norms, primary prevention, sexuality, HIV, and women's economic and social empowerment. She has over 30 years of experience working with and learning from colleagues in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And Laurie, it's for us such a privilege to listen to you today. Laurie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm actually coming from South Africa. Interestingly enough, I'm here working with some colleagues. I normally live in Guatemala, and I'm from the US. And so just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm really excited about this because I feel like I really hope that this community of practice can engage not with those who are not exclusively with those who are already working with faith communities and engaged in those challenges, but more of us from the feminist movement and women's rights organizations who work on violence, which is the community that I come from. And my experience over the years has been that there's a real resistance amongst many of my colleagues and groups I've worked with to engage with the faith community. And I understand that because they see it as one of the cultural institutions that reinforce the norms and that is used to justify at times the inequality of women or the disciplining of women, and that we all know that the great books of whatever religion can be used and abused in multiple different ways. And it is true that I both work as a practitioner and as a researcher. And, the things that comes up all the time is as a justification or as a point of reference is, well, the Bible says, or the Hadith says, or whatever. So I understand that suspicion. At the same time, if we know that this is one of the institutions whose norms and everything needs to change. And we also recognize that we have the power as women and as different communities to do our own analysis of our religion and to offer, there's just as many, I come from more of a Christian tradition. There's just as many verses that can be pulled to make the case for equality and against violence as there are to support it. And it's always saddened me in some respects that there hasn't been more space for that dialogue. And, I think the fact that so many people have come to this group means that maybe there's a moment now. But in point of fact, I'm involved in a big global consortium of groups working on implementing and researching violence prevention interventions. And quite frankly, of all the proposals that were submitted that had to do anything with faith communities, they were almost dismissed out of hand. And I really challenged that. But that is something that we're up against in terms of even having the dialogue. And it's always struck me as odd because as feminists, we're always like, we want to meet women where they're at, and we want to be woman-centered. And when I listen to women, faith is super important to many, many women. And so I just don't understand this inconsistency in my own community. Also, I think that, I also see a huge inconsistency where we've never discounted or it seems to me that many women's groups spend an enormous amount of time engaging in trying to transform the justice system and the police and all of these institutions that are equally problematic. And there has been a willingness to recognize that we have to work to try to transform them and also find allies. And yet in faith, for some reason, there's even a stronger resistance. So I'm really pleased that this is happening. I'm going to work as hard as I can to try to bring in those folks who I know are uncomfortable to the space, so we can hear them, and we can also, as a community, try to understand and talk through some of these issues, because I think it has been a barrier. And I'm just really pleased that all of you who are organizing this are doing it on our collective behalf.
Thank you so much, Laurie, for making the time. Laurie's in the middle of a workshop that she stepped out to be with us. So thank you so much, Laurie. And that was really insightful. Thank you for sharing, again, like Vina, from your own experiences, almost about this tension that we're experiencing in the ebook space, and for journeying with us around this. I want to take now about 5 minutes, but I'm going to try and do it in less time to just share with everyone what we have planned for the COP in this coming year. So maybe just to say, I'm COP lead. That's why I'm the one sharing about this. I'm a consultant assisting SVRI with setting up the COP and with running it for this coming year. So we have two key objectives for the community of practice for the Faith and GBV COP. You'll see it there. Thanks, Mona, on the slide. So the first one is to help build an international development community that understands the role of faith and faith actors and faith communities in GBV prevention and response, and are able and willing to engage with faith and faith actors in addressing GBV. And then second, and kind of equally important, to help strengthen the capacity of faith leaders from different faiths to understand the drivers of GBV and enable their commitment to prevention and response in collaboration with other multi-sectoral stakeholders. So really the hope for us with the COP is to just start kind of bridging those gaps and making those connections. So the COP, like I said at the start, we have 466 people thus far that have signed up, and we're delighted about it. Overwhelmed, but delighted. And we have 5 virtual events over the coming year, as well as 1 in-person event. Everyone who registered for the COP will be invited to these events, but they will be open events. So people don't have to be a member of the COP to join these COP events. We didn't start the community of practice for it to run for all eternity. Currently, we have plans for the next year, for the next 12 months. And then towards the end of the year, we'll discuss with the COP members how to go forward. People will be able to join the COP throughout the year. So membership will never close, but the working groups, you can join until December of this year. So let me just tell you, kind of briefly introduce the working groups before the working group chairs will share more. So key to the community of practice is 3 working groups. Working group 1 is chaired by Rafael Cesarin. So Rafael is originally from Brazil, and then he spent some time here in South Africa, and he's now based in Spain. And he's running working group 1 that is focused on advancing research and policy at the intersection of gender, religion, and spirituality. And this group will have a particular emphasis on decolonial approaches and the experiences of young people. And Rafael is particularly excited about South-South learning, seeing his own positioning. And he is co-chaired with Sinitemba Makanya. So Rafael will, just after I've done explaining, he'll tell us a bit more about his working group and what they have in mind. Then working group 2 is chaired by Selena Palm. She's based here in South Africa for the last 2 decades. And working group 2 is focused on exploring like the really important practical roles of religious actors in ending violence against children. So again, this working group will bring together members from or working within the African continent to really develop like useful resources for local faith leaders and actors. And they'll draw on existing and emerging research findings. Then working group 3 is being chaired by Nora Kalafilej, and she will be working with her co-chair, Sarah Mashum, who some of you may know from her excellent work with Musawa. Now, working group 3 will focus on identifying barriers and opportunities in effective communication around GBV, and then specifically the communication between faith actors and policymakers, where we often see that there's a massive gap. And their focus will also be really around developing practical tools and resources to promote communication and conversation. Now, like I said, we have the 3 working group chairs here today, and they will each be sharing just a bit more detail. So Rafael, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for the lovely introduction. And also like to thank Lori and Vina for the great presentations, sharing the experiences, which I think that lay a very good foundation for what we want to achieve with the community of practice. We also have some aspects in common, experiences in common. I was also very connected to the South African context. For 5 years, I worked in South Africa in the field of SGBV and faith and religion. And I'm originally Brazilian. I'm a social scientist. I'm currently based in Spain, always in between academia and social justice and human rights-based organizations, focusing mostly, again, on religion, faith, and social transformation. So as I could relate to many of the experiences that Vina experienced, also in her work across Africa. I've also done a fair amount of field work in Southern Africa, and I think that through all these experiences, it became clear that it's important to understand the notion of evidence and evidence building from a broader perspective, a comprehensive perspective. So when I was asked to put together this working group, I first thought about how we understand evidence. The team that I brought together reflects, I think, the importance of a broad, inclusive approach to evidence building. And I'm excited to introduce to you the incredible team that we are. We've got Dr. Sinatema Makanya, who is an indigenous healer, specialized in psychospiritual well-being and sexual reproductive health. She's also a senior lecturer at the University of Johannesburg. We're also going to have with us Nobantu Shabangu, trained in performative arts and focused on applied drama and theater research. She'll be helping us to facilitate the African side. And we also have Leonardo Andrade, based in Argentina currently, a PhD researcher in Latin American studies and policy analyst for the Brazilian government. I think that our teams, and you can move to the next slide, Numa. Thank you. Our team diversity reflects, I think, that how we envision pushing the boundaries of evidence building in this field. We know that we've made progress, as Lori mentioned, in understanding the role of faith, but there is still a lot of taboos and limitations in working in this field. So we will be focusing on 3 key areas. First, on the colonial approaches to evidence building. Second, policy-oriented research. And third, the South-South knowledge exchange that Lisa mentioned. We are also particularly interested in capturing the experiences and perspectives of young people of faith, young faith leaders, and youth-based faith groups. And again, as we understand, the way we understand evidence here is not only formally based on data. We also want experiences shared by program managers, faith leaders, people of faith from all backgrounds, and not only limited to research in academia. So we'd like to extend an invitation to faith leaders, activists, everyone working and interested in this field, but also those interested in dialoguing with Latin American initiatives. And in this sense, I also like to focus a bit on, based on my background, on the Latin American initiatives and everyone interested in those initiatives in conversation with African, the work done in Africa in this field. The next slide, thank you. So as members of this group, we will have the opportunity to engage in various activities, and we prepared so far a couple of thematic roundtables on LGBTIQ issues, on tradition and culture, women and girls, and so on. We're going to also be writing and contributing to key topics in these issues, in these themes. We've got prepared also focus groups so we can discuss and also build evidence among ourselves throughout the project, sharing also important events and publications within the platforms that we choose to collaborate, networking and exchanging ideas. So we are very excited to bring together diverse voices and perspectives as we work collaboratively to advance on this working group and together with the other working groups too. So I'll leave you with Selina Baum, the chair of Working Group 2.
Thanks so much, Raphael. Hi, everyone. My name's Selina, and as Lisa said, I'm based in South Africa, and I'm chairing Working Group 2 with a focus on faith and violence against children. So just a quick side note on how I come to this topic. I've been both a practitioner and a grant maker, working with diverse faith communities and vulnerable children for over a decade in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as in the UK, the US, and Southeast Asia. And to be honest, back then, I rarely had time to read the latest research in many of the areas I was working in. But I learned so much by doing and by working alongside other experienced practitioners. So I'm passionate about centering practice-based knowledge now as a researcher and an educator. And I'm so excited about communities of practice like this because of their potential for that peer-to-peer storytelling. Vina mentioned that heaps of lived experience and just learning together. From diverse but specific contexts. And maybe just a couple more of my hats. I'm also a feminist theologian, a theological educator, and a lay faith leader in my local church where I work with children and young people. I don't have a formal co-chair for this group, but I'm planning to have a small steering committee who will support the co-design and facilitation of the 10-week pilot course that we hope to design as a key part of this group. Next slide, please. I know that many of you have joined this community of practice because of a specific interest in gender-based violence, and you may be wondering how violence against children fits into that. We know that gender-based violence, especially within the home and family, often affects both women and children of all genders. We're also increasingly aware of the intergenerational cycle of gender-based violence, where the gendered cycles of both perpetration and victimization are influenced by childhood experiences, as this slide briefly shows. We know that violence against women and violence against children often have many shared both risk and protective factors, and we're learning together about the importance of a gender lens on childhood, where many gendered social norms are first entrenched, and where both boys and girls face some similar and some different risks of violence, which are often interconnected over generations. Next slide, please. So the main aim of Working Group 2 is to emphasise this value of engaging the mechanisms of faith and violence against children. And obviously Vina has spoken about this importance of those mechanisms of faith in the African context in particular. The group plans to move forwards, in a sense, from research to the practical resourcing of faith actors in their specific contexts. And I was really struck by Vina's point that 80% of religious leaders may not have been through formal education. We already have a body of research evidence on the roles of faith actors in both perpetrating and also helping to end violence against children. And one example of this that you'll see here is a 3-part scoping study on the slide in which I was directly involved. It gives an overview of key trends within the literature on this topic, but it also captures knowledge held within organisational case studies and showcases the insights of practitioners working within and across many different faith contexts. So we actually know many important things about this intersection, and I'm afraid you're going to have to join my group to learn more about those things. But in the light of this, what I wanted to focus on with this working group is enabling these kinds of research insights to be embodied and engaged in practical ways in specific contexts with local practitioners and faith practitioners, strengthening their capacity to act for change. Next slide, please. So to do this, one of the main activities of this working group is going to be the co-development of an online course, drawing on the peer insights from within its members and enabling a peer-to-peer space for the sharing of stories, lessons, and experiences, as well as the structured discussion of the implications of this body of evidence for faith actors in different contexts. We're hoping to have direct engagement with some of the experts featured in the research, as well as some of the members of the working group. So you'll see here that this is a bit of a teaser draft outline of the course. I want to highlight that the course is super open to being amended in response to members in the group and the issues they want to speak about. So this is very much a draft to start a conversation, and our first working group meeting is going to start to critically explore this outline. One of the nice things is that we'll be able to use SVRI's pre-existing educational platform to create a course that is tailored for faith actors and those working directly with them. It will sadly only be in English for now, but those speaking other languages are going to have ways to contribute their experiences, writing in their preferred language, so that we can translate these and use them as well. Next slide, please. So what's in it for you? Many of you have already signed up. We've been overwhelmed by the sign up to our different groups. Just to highlight that this particular working group is an Africa-centered focus, but it's not exclusive to African participants only. We're going to be listening also to voices from around the world that reflect on issues important within the African continent. And there's going to be a number of possible opportunities for each of you to engage and contribute around this shared task, framed here as different levels of engagement. And again, we're going to speak more about this at our first working group meeting, but from kind of level 1, participating just in those 4 main working group meetings, to contributing directly from your experience to the course content, applying to be on the pilot course yourself, or for those with the right expertise to be on the small steering committee that's looking at the overall course. So if you're signed up to this group, you'll get a Google survey form really soon telling you more about those levels. So please have a look out for that. And next slide, please. And then just to say, please diarise, our kickoff meeting for this working group is on the 26th of September, which is next Thursday at 3 o'clock South African time. So all who have signed up and all of those who would still like to sign up, we'll be discussing this plan in more detail. And please look out for that Google Doc survey where you'll have a chance to interact, and that's going to be sent out to everybody who's applied to be part of the working group. So yeah, that's it from me, and I'm going to hand over now to Nora to speak a little bit about working group 3.
Great, thank you so much, Selena. It's so great to be here. I said this before, I love working in this space because the people that I meet here are just full of inspiration, full of passion for their cause, and it's like you meet the best people on this space. So it's a real privilege to be here. My name is Nora. A little bit about myself first, and then I'll talk about the working group. I'm originally from Egypt, but I spent a lot of time in Spain and Germany as well. And so I've grown up between different religions, and to me, religion and gender were always just so closely intertwined, and I never thought of thinking about them separately, but I then worked for about 10 years in gender and development, mainly with bilateral and multilateral policymakers. And I've grown very frustrated because I noticed how religion was just sort of dismissed or simplified and just ignored. And I was so disappointed because I just didn't understand why we cannot have a constructive conversation about something that is so integral to any work on gender. And so I went back to school. I did my PhD on gender and religion. And for the past 5 years, I've been working with policymakers on this very subject, on how to engage with religion in a meaningful way, how to talk about it. And so working group 3 is all about communication. It's all about having a constructive conversation about religion. And I'm hoping that we can bring a lot of policymakers, faith leaders, gender practitioners, and researchers together to answer this one question. Why is it that conversations around GBV hit a wall when faith enters a discussion? And how can we overcome this wall? And I'm sure many of you have been in situations where you decided or you were told that this whole religion gender soup is just too sensitive and too political, and it's just too messy to engage with, so let's just stay away from it. And when development actors cannot speak with legitimacy about religion, they often take a different approach. For example, an approach based on health or development principles, and this makes sense in some cases, but in others, it leaves space for conservative voices to dominate that space. And it begs the question, why can't we critically engage with religion and fact check religious claims, just like we fact check any other claims in development, be it economic claims, population claims, environmental claims, and so on. So this working group will develop a toolkit that will help guide especially two sides of this conversation, the policymaker side and the faith leader side. And it will literally be a step-by-step guide that will walk practitioners through those conversations and equip policymakers with what they need to feel confident and to feel pressed to actually engage meaningfully with religion, to do their homework before the conversation, to have this religious literacy, to then engage and move beyond the part when religion enters the conversation and keep the conversation going. And for faith leaders, the toolkit will give them the skills that they need to advocate effectively to policymakers on the crucial role that faith play and that faith leaders play in the context of GBV. And so the toolkit will highlight the many different angles from which you can approach these conversations and the many different sources of legitimacy that exists in this space. It will also provide practical steps to distinguish between religion and patriarchy, which is a very important part of this conversation because religion is so often used to sacralize patriarchy, and then it makes it seem untouchable and undiscussable. The group will be led by myself, as well as my colleague, Sarah. Sarah is a feminist activist with Musawa, and she has spent so many years engaging with the Islamic tradition and dismantling patriarchy in Muslim contexts. She's a real inspirational person. This is a 24/7 job for her, and we're both so excited to meet you, to have you join us in this journey. Our first meeting will be on October 9th. And we look forward to seeing you there. And I'll hand over to Lisa again.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nora, Selena, and Raphael. Well, while the three chairs were explaining, the Q&A already started in the chat box. So even though we're a little bit, we have a little bit less time for Q&A than planned, I do feel that it's been ongoing. Just to reply to something that's been raised quite a bit, you can join a working group up until December. You join a working group by registering for the CoP. When you click on the link to register for the CoP, it's going to take you to a Google form where you answer some questions, and then you indicate if you want to join a working group and which one you want to join. If you do that and you click OK on the form, then your contact information will be shared with a relevant chair. So you sign up to a working group when you sign up to the CoP. And yes, you can join more than one working group. That seems to be a question that many people are asking. We have 2 or 3 minutes left. Any other questions? Let me check now on the Q&A, or raise your hand if you want to answer live, ask live. I think all the others have now been answered in the Q&A box. Morma or anyone else, is there a question that we missed in the chat box? Oh, there is one question that was asked by a couple of people. If you've already registered for the CoP and signed up for a certain working group, but now you're worried because you haven't heard from the chair yet, please don't worry. We just waited for this official launch. Now the chairs will start to reach out to everyone who signed up to a working group. So don't worry, you haven't been rejected. It's just, we just waited for the launch, okay? Any other questions?
So you might want to just comment on Danielle's question in the chat.
Which Danielle, we've already signed it.
At the bottom.
Oh, I see. Oh, Danielle, good question. I'm actually going to ask you, please go and register again, just because now that we can as quickly as possible get people to the working groups that they want to. So please just go and register again and sign up for the one that you want to be part of. Any other? Thanks for flagging that, Selena. Between the screens, I'm getting flustered. Any other questions? Okay. We'll stop there now, but remember, this is not the only opportunity to ask questions. I think the big question asking will be with the first meetings of the different working groups. So, and when the chairs send you, will be reaching out now to you. There's also opportunity then to ask questions. This presentation, Mulenga, yes, this presentation will be shared. So everyone who registered for the CoP launch will receive the link to the webinar, and it will also go up on SVRI's website where the CoP has a project page. Okay. And David's asking, can you join all three groups? And David, yes, you can join all three groups. There's no limit. Okay, so I want to wrap up now because we promised this will be an hour, and I'm so proud of ourselves that we actually stuck to the hour. Thank you so much to our speakers, Tavina and Lori. I really appreciated just your sharing from your experiences. That has meant so much to us. Thank you also to Liz and Nora and Selena and Raphael for sharing more about SVRI and about the specific working groups. And then just a big thanks to Morma, who just organized the webinar and all the tech stuff. It was just on top of everything. I want to thank all of you who joined, who attended today, for making time. And really, I keep saying this, but we're really delighted that you could find the time to be here. And I want to just remind all of you of kind of key upcoming dates. So first, please register for the CoP. Morma will place that link. It's in the chat box, but she'll put it up there again. So remember, there's no separate registration form for the working groups. You register for the working groups in that registration form for the CoP. Our next CoP-wide event will be an informal meet and greet at the SVRI forum at the end of October, and we will be sending out an email with more information on that. Then Working Group 2 will have their first meeting on the 26th of September. Working Group 1 will have their first one on the 1st of October, and Working Group 3 will have theirs on the 2nd of October. So David, you're going to be busy there at the end of September and the start of October. But if you signed up for these groups, you will be receiving the email from the working group chair. And then our next CoP-wide virtual event will be on the 14th of November, where Raphael and Cindy Tenba will be sharing more of what Working Group 1 has been doing and learning. Now it's starting to rain incredibly hard here where I am. So the skies is giving me a sign that it's time to end. I want to thank you. Thank you so much for being here today, and very excited to go on this journey. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.